It was a typical night at St. Mary's Church, nestled in the heart of a small, secluded town. The air was still, and as I went about my duties of cleaning and organizing, the church seemed to take on a life of its own. The sun had long set, and an eerie stillness settled in. As I meticulously worked my way through the pews, a faint, melodic sound reached my ears. It was the sound of piano, delicate and haunting, drifting the air from somewhere above. My heart quickened, and I strained to locate the source. But how could it be? The church had no piano, and the only way to access the upper levels was through a narrow staircase leading to the attic. Thinking it was perhaps a prank, I couldn't resist the pull of curiosity. I made way up the creaking stairs, each step resonating with the weight of his story. The music grew louder, its melancholic melody waving through the dimly lit corridor. Shadows danced on the walls, casting eerie shapes that seemed to mimic the ethereal notes. With a mix of trepidation and determination, I pushed open the attic door, fully expecting to catch the mischievous culprit in the act. But to my astonishment, the room was empty. Yet, the haunting melody continued to fill the air, resonating deep within my bones. It seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. A sense of unease washed over me, and I turned to live, eager to escape the mysterious symphony. Seeking solace and answers, I sought out Julia, the only other person who shared the night shift with me. She had been working at church for years and was well versed in its peculiarities. I found her in the sacristy carefully arranging candles, her face illuminated by flickering flames. "Julia, have you ever experienced anything strange in this church?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She turned to me, a knowing smile on her lips. "Oh, so you've encountered ghostly whispers, haven't you?" I nodded, relief flooding over me. It was a relief to know I wasn't alone in my experience. Strange occurrences have been part of this church's story for as long as anyone can remember, Julia continued. Whispers in the night, mysterious footsteps, and even apparitions have been reported by who have walked here. I listened intently, my skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. "Some say that church is haunted by the spirit of a former musician," Julia said, her voice dropping to a hushed tone. "Legend has it that he was a talented pianist who played for the church and its congregation. However, tragedy befell him on fateful night. During a thunderstorm, he was struck by lightning while playing, and his soul became forever intertwined with the music he loved so dearly." I shivered at the thought, the haunting melody still echoing in my mind. Many have heard his piano playing from the attic, and others have witnessed strange occurrences throughout the church, Julia continued. "But fear not, for the spirit is said to be benevolent. It seems he merely yearns to share his passion for music, even in the afterlife." And with this newfound knowledge, I found myself drawn back to the attic, fueled by both fear and fascination. And this time I was not alone. Julia agreed to accompany me, her calm presence providing a sense of reassurance. As we ascended the stairs, the atmosphere grew heavy, the air thick with anticipation. The haunting melody reached our ears, beckoning us closer. We entered the attic, its dimly lit expanse casting eerie shadows on the worn wooden floor. The piano music, now louder and more vivid, surrounded us, enveloping us in its ethereal embrace. With each step, the music seemed to grow stronger, as if the spirit recognized our presence and longed to communicate. We approached the metal door, its surface cold to touch, hesitant yet determined. I reached out to grasp the handle, and with a deep breath, I slowly pulled the door open. To our amazement, the room beyond was a small, forgotten chamber, filled with dusty sheet music and aged instruments. The sound of the piano grew deafening, filling the space with its haunting melody. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on an old, withered granite piano tucked in the corner. Without thinking, I approached the piano, my fingers trembling in anticipation. I sat down, my hands hovering over the keys, unsure of what to expect. And then, as if guided by unseen force, I began to play. The melody flowed effortlessly from my fingertips, as if the spirit of the musician had taken hold of my hands. The music swelled, filling the attic with its bittersweet beauty. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the enchanting power of the moment. As the last note resonated in the air, a profound stillness settled over the room. The haunting melody had ceased, and I opened my eyes to find Julia staring at me in awe. You played as if you were possessed by the spirit?" she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded, overwhelmed by the experience. In that moment, I felt a deep connection to musician's soul, his passion and longing echoing within me. From that day forward, the haunting melody became part of my life. I returned to the attic often, sitting at the grand piano, allowing the spirit music to flow through me. It became a form communion, a bridge between the living and the departed. Word of the mysterious pianist spread throughout the town, drawing visitors from far and wide to witness a ethereal performance in the church attic. People were moved by the music, their hearts touched by the lingering presence of a soul who had found solace in sharing his gift. And so, the church became a sanctuary, not only for those seeking solace in their faith, but also for lost spirits yearning to be heard. The haunting melody served as a reminder that even in the realm of the unseen, the power of music could transcend the boundaries between the living and the dead. As for me, I embraced my role as the conduit between worlds, the truth of the spirit's story. The church attic, once a place of fear, had become a sacred space where the past and present intertwined, where the mysteries of life and death found harmony in the haunting melody that played on. I remember the night like it was yesterday. I was working the graveyard shift at the prison, and I had just started my rounds. It was a little after 2 a.m., and the prison was quiet, except for the occasional sound of the distant yell or the clanging of metal doors. I was making my way down the hall when I saw him. He was tall and skinny, with long dreads that seemed to move of their own accord. He was walking toward the bathroom, and he seemed to be in a hurry. I stood at the entrance to the bathroom and called out to him. "Hey, what cell are you in?" I asked. He didn't answer, and I thought maybe he didn't hear me. So, I called out again, but still there was no response. I shrugged and decided to go in and check the bathroom. I walked back out into the hall and continued my rounds. But as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced over my shoulder, but there was no one there. I quickened my pace, telling myself it was just my imagination, but the feeling persisted. When I got back to the control room, I told one of my coworkers about what had happened. "Hey, did you see that guy in the bathroom?" I asked. He looked at me with a strange expression and said, "Oh, you saw Mr. Bones." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Who's Mr. Bones?" I asked. "He was a prisoner here who killed himself a few years ago," my coworker said. "But he still hangs around. Some of the guards have seen him late at night, walking around the prison." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I had heard rumors of ghost apparitions in the prison, but I had always dismissed them as mere rumors. But now, I wasn't so sure. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I walked down the hall, I felt like someone was behind me. I would turn around, but there would be no one there. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. One night, I decided to do some research on the prison's history. I went to the library and dug up some old newspaper and books. And what I found was shocking. It turned out that the prison had a long history of suicides and violent deaths. Inmates had hung themselves in their cells, and guards had been killed in violent altercations. It seemed that the prison was a place where death was a constant presence. I realized that Mr. Bones was not alone. There were many other ghosts that haunted the prison's halls, and I had seen one of them. As the days went by, I started to see Mr. Bones more often. He would appear in the bathroom or in the hallways, always walking quickly, as if he were late for some appointment. I would try to talk to him, but he never responded. I started to feel like I was a part of a strange, ghostly world. I would see things out the corner of my eye, hear strange noises, and feel like I was being touched by unseen hands. It was like the prison was alive, and it was watching me. I knew I had to tell someone about what was happening. I decided to talk to the warden. I went to his office and told him everything. He listened intently, nodding his head as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "I've heard the rumors too. but I've never seen anything myself. I've always thought it was just the imagination of tired guards. What? But what am I supposed to do? I asked. I can't keep working here if I'm seeing ghosts. The warden leaned forward and said, "Look, I believe you, and I'll tell you what. I'll transfer you to another wing. Maybe a chance of scenery will help." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. Maybe a change of scenery would help. Maybe I could leave Mr. Bones and the other ghosts behind. But as I walked out the warden's office, I saw him again. Mr. Bone was standing in the hall, walking toward the bathroom. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew then that I would never be able to escape the ghosts of the prison. They were a part of me now, a constant presence that I would have to live with for the rest of my life. As I walked away, I heard a faint noise behind me. I turned around, and Mr. Bone was standing there, looking at me with a sad expression. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "I'm sorry," I mouthed, not sure if he could hear me. I didn't mean to disturb you." Mr. Bones didn't respond. He just stood there, looking at me with a haunted expression. And then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I knew then that I would never be able to shake off the feeling of being watched. The ghost of the prison would always be with me, a constant reminder of the tragic events that had taken place within its walls. As I walked away, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the prison held, what other ghosts haunted its halls, what other stories were waiting to be told. I know that I would never forget my time at the prison. It had changed me in ways I could never have imagined. And as I walked away, I know that I would always be haunted by the ghost of the past. I've been working as a janitor at the airport parking garage for a few years now. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills. Plus, I don't mind the solitude. It gives me time to think. One night, I was making my rounds on the top deck of the garage. It was late, and the only sound was the distant hum of cars on the highway. I was almost finished for the night when I noticed something strange. At first, I thought it was just a bunch of crows or ravens perched on top of a truck parked in the corner of the deck. But as I got closer, I realized that there were thousands of them, maybe even thousands, all crowded onto the truck and fluttering around its bed. I approached slowly, my flashlight illuminating the scene. The smell hit me before I even saw the carcasses. It was a sickly sweet, putrid odor that made my stomach turn. I shone my flashlight towards the truck and saw the source of the smell. There were two large animal carcasses in back of the truck, their heads missing and their bodies bloated and decaying. The ravens were tearing at the carcasses, pulling out hunks of flesh and gorging themselves. They would fly off for a moment, only to be replaced by another bird, who would take its turn picking at the rotting meat. I felt my stomach turn, and I stumbled backwards, tripping over a concrete barrier. I caught myself before I fell, but not before I dropped my flashlight. I clattered to the ground. It's been flickering and casting eerie shadows on the walls of the garage. I stood there for a moment, trying to collect myself. I know I had to report this to my supervisor, but something held me back. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me. Finally, I picked up my flashlight and made my way back to garage office. I found my supervisor, Mike, sitting at his desk, typing on his computer. "Mike, you need to come with me," I said, my voice shaking. "What's going on, John?" he asked, looking up from his computer. "You need to see this," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike followed me back to the top deck of the garage. As we approached the truck, Mike's nose wrinkled in disgust. "What the hell is that smell?" he asked, covering his nose with his hand. I didn't answer. I just pointed towards the truck, my hand trembling. Mike followed my gaze and saw the carcasses, the ravens, and the swarm of birds. "Oh, damn," he muttered. "How long has this been going on?" I don't know," I replied. "I just found it tonight." Mike pulled out his phone and called the police. He explained the situation, and they told him they would send someone over right away. While we waited, Mike and I stood in silence, watching the ravens pick at the carcasses. It was a gruesome sight, one that neither of us would ever forget. When the police arrived, they surveyed the scene and took notes. They asked Mike and me a few questions, but mostly they just listened and took pictures. After they left, Mike turned to me. I don't know what to say, John," he said, his voice filled with concern. I'm sorry you had to see that." I nodded, but I didn't say anything. I was still in shock, still trying to process what I had seen. Over the next few days, the story of the truck with the carcasses made headlines. People were horrified and outraged, and there were calls for an investigation. The owner of the truck was eventually tracked down and arrested. It turned out that he was a poacher, and he had been using the truck to transport illegal animal parts. The carcasses in the back of the truck were just a small part of his operation. I was hailed as a hero for reporting the situation, but I didn't feel like one. I couldn't shake the image of the ravens, tearing at the flesh of the dead animals. It was a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the world. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, life slowly began to return to normal. The parking garage was cleaned and disinfected, and the truck was towed away. But I know that I would never forget what I had seen that night. The memory of the carcasses and the ravens would stay with me forever, a dark reminder of the horrors that lurked into the shadows.